Well, this is our last session together, exploring the idea that a group of 10 that doubles every 18 months will reach 1,000 people for God in 10 years. And we do that through the bridges of God. The way the gospel gets from here to there is over the bridge of relationship. And we want to make relational evangelism intentional evangelism by teaching a halfway decent lesson each and every week, nothing less will do, inviting every member and every prospect to every fellowship every month, giving Friday night or some other night or Sunday lunch or Sunday afternoon or something like that, giving Friday nights to Jesus, encouraging the whole group to be involved in these kinds of things. And lastly, we want to talk this week about reproducing your group. And at the end of the day, once again, it is what the Bible says. Paul said, the things you have heard me say. So there's me and there's you. That's two generations right there. The things that you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses. That's generation number 3. We don't know how many witnesses. I tend to eat, breathe, drink, think small groups. And I think about a small group the size of Jesus' small group, about the size of 12. My observation is once you get past about a 12, you got a back row. Maybe a physical, literal back row, but even if you do not have a physical, literal back row, if you get more than about 12, you have a sociological, what's the word I would use there, back row of some kind. What I mean is you got some people who will participate in the discussion and you got a good number of others who will not if you get more than about 12. But he says many witnesses. The things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, that's generation number 3. Generation number 1, Paul. Generation number 2, Timothy. Generation number 3, many witnesses. Entrust to reliable people, reliable men, faithful men, translations have it, who will also be qualified to teach others. Maybe a graphic would help. So here's Paul, and if you can imagine Paul that said this to some other Timothys along the line, and if you can imagine that each one of these boxes represents 10 people, a small group of 10 people, just because the math gets real easy at 10. That box where it says Paul, that represents 10 people, and the box where it says Timothy, that represents 10 people. And the first other Timothy, that's 10 more, so up to 30 now. In the next box, that's 40 people, and then 50 people. So this graph here would represent 50 people. But Paul didn't stop there. He said, the things you've heard me say, Timothy, in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men, reliable people, as the NIV has it, but this translation had it, faithful men. And if each one of these Timothys reproduced in 4 others, then we have 50 in each one of those clusters. So that's 50, 50, 50, 50. That's 200 plus Paul. That's 210. And if each one of these reproduced into others, then we would have 860, I think it is, who are reached. And it reminds us that a group of 10 that doubles every 18 months will reach 1,000 people for God in 10 years. Let's look not at a graphic, but a picture. Here's a picture a guy showed me. I think a guy from Missouri somewhere showed me. But anyway, here's a guy by the name of Paul. And truth be told, I don't know his real name is Paul. But he's holding up a sign that says Paul, so I'm going to call this guy Paul. And Paul got a vision, and I'm hoping that you will get a vision for doubling groups. And that vision was to live out 2 Timothy 2:2. Paul felt like until I come up with a plan or until I come up with a better plan, I'm going to just give myself to this plan. And that is I'm going to find a group. And in that group, I'm going to find some Timothys there. And you can see them there holding those aqua letters, Timothy. And they imparted to others, faithful men. Back in red there, faithfull, not one L, men, faithful men who will also be qualified to teach OTHERS. And it's not hard to see that we will have a movement if we embrace the vision of a group doubling every 2 years or less, if we embrace the vision of living out 2 Timothy 2:2. And this is the last part of our strategy, and that is we want to reproduce our group. And here's the deal. Eventually, growth will kill a small group. That is, eventually, it's not small anymore. Eventually, that group will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and somewhere along the line, if it's reaching out to others and doing evangelism and doing outreach, eventually, it's not big anymore. And as it grows bigger and bigger and bigger, it quits doing what a small group is supposed to do. Here's another observation I've made over the years, and that is there is an inverse relationship between the size of the group and the amount of life change. I've started a number of groups over the years and was a little disappointed when I got the group together, that new group together, and there was only 3 or 4 or 5 of us. Sometimes it's just 2 of us. And I was a little disappointed, and I thought to myself, boy, this is terrible. Just got 2 or 3 people here, just me and 2 or 3 people. We had that exciting group of 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever it was. Now we got this little bitty group of 2 or 3, and it's just not near as exciting as it used to be. But then I thought, well, we're going to teach them anyway. And we dive into the teaching, and an hour later, I'd find myself saying, you know what, there was more life change in this group, in this hour, than we've had in the last quarter in the other group. There is something about a real small group where people can get honest and they can apply the teaching of the Word of God to their own lives, and good things can happen. And there is an inverse relationship. The bigger the group, the lower the life change. The smaller the group, the bigger the life change tends to be. Here's another observation I've made, and that is this. When people are not missed, they will tend to miss. And if you have a group of 6 or 8, and somebody, let's say it's a group of 8, 4 couples, and then one of them does not show up, do you miss them? You absolutely miss it. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think. Let's think who's not here today. You'll just say, where are the Thomases today? It'll be the most obvious thing in the world. When they come back next week, you will say to them automatically, without having to work at it, hey, we missed you last week. It'll be the most automatic thing in the world in a group of 8. In a group of 28, it won't be. And when people are not missed, they will miss. And I've had many people told me over the years, well, you know, we got sick and we were in the hospital. We dropped out for a few weeks, and nobody ever called and nobody ever contacted us. And then we came back and nobody noticed. Nobody noticed us. And it's not because you're bad people. It's not because you're stupid. It's only a function of the size of the group. When people are not missed, they will tend to miss. I learned this lesson the hard way. One time this was before I learned about the value of smaller groups. And anyway, our group had gone pretty large, about 30, I think, and we had a big old group. We're all still in a circle, by the way. There wasn't a back row, at least physically there wasn't a back row. But anyway, we were in this big room in a big circle, and had a good discussion time and so on. And there's one couple in there that you ever have these people that they look familiar, but you don't know where you've seen them before. And the whole time I was teaching, I was distracted by this idea that, like, who is that couple? And I asked my wife afterwards, got her aside, who was that couple? And she said, Josh, we spent about 3 hours with that couple 3 weeks ago on a Friday night. And you may think, boy, you're not the sharpest knife in the cupboard, and that very well might be true. But here's the deal. You get your group to grow from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 to 25, and maybe you could keep up with 100 people. But somewhere along the line, you will not be able to keep up with that many people. There's an illustration about the Lego principle, and the idea is we've all got so many spots on our Lego, and you can connect one person here and one person here and one person here and one person here and one person here. And after a while, your Lego block is full. You only got so many evenings a month you're going to do something with somebody. And you're going to do something with your friends, or you're going to do something with people that you want to be friends, you want to include in your group. But somewhere along the line, growth will kill a small group. I had a guy say to me one time, Josh, I got good news. I doubled twice in the last 3 months. Your book talks about you can double your class in 2 years or less. I doubled my group twice. I said, tell me your story. Well, he said, me and my wife and I, we started with a small group, one other couple, if I remember right. So it was 4 of us. And we did what you said, and we invited every member and every prospect to every fellowship every month, and we gave Friday nights to Jesus, and we had some parties and so on. And next thing you know, another couple came, and then another couple came, and now we had 8. And then we did some more parties, and we cast a vision, and we encouraged the group toward ministry, and we gave Friday nights to Jesus, and we invited every member and every prospect to every fellowship every month. And next thing you know, a month later, we had 16. And truth be told, it's fairly easy to go from 4 to 8. And it's a little bit harder, but it's still within the realm of the possibility of a normal person to go from 8 to 16. But I'm telling you, it's a rare bird. It's a rare bird who's going to be able to grow a group from 16 to 32. Eventually, growth will kill a small group. But if you embrace the vision of living out 2 Timothy 2:2, and you get you an apprentice, and you say to that apprentice the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others, and you send off 6 or 8 people to start a new group, you can do it again and again and again. And I've seen it happen more times than you could count. Well, why don't we do this? Why doesn't it happen all the time? Why doesn't it happen automatically? Well, one reason, I'm going to give you 2 reasons, but one reason is what I call the high price of saying goodbye. You know what, from the viewpoint of a missionary's kid, you know what keeps more missionaries, in my unscientific opinion, off the mission field than anything else? What keeps us from raising up more missionaries to go around the world proclaiming the good news of the gospel? I would say the answer is grandparents. And as a grandparent, I understand this a little bit better than I used to. But when my parents went to my grandparents and told them that they felt called of God to move 10,000 miles, and this was before the days of email, it was before the days of jet travel. And they were going to move their children and their grandchildren. And it was before the time I was born, so it was my older brother and sister. But anyway, they were going to move those grandchildren 10,000 miles, and those grandparents were going to miss the next 4 birthdays, the next 4 Christmases. My grandparents said to my parents, no, you're not. You're not taking them away. And my parents had to struggle with the high price of saying goodbye. And the price of being involved in a doubling group movement is that we will have to say goodbye again and again and again and again. And sometimes we are simply not willing to do this, which is, I think, the second reason why this does not happen routinely, why it does not happen all the time. It's not that we cannot figure out how to do it. It's not that we can't figure out how to grow a group from 6 to 12. It's that this issue of willingness. I learned this lesson in one particular church. A man arrived a little bit early, showed up on the front row, and he and I got to talking, and he said to me, you know, the name of this seminar is You Can Double Your Class in 2 years or Less. And I want to tell you just right up front, I've come to this seminar. I'm sitting here on the front row, but I want to tell you right up front, we're not going to be able to double my class in 2 years or less. I said, oh, really? Why? Tell me, talk to me, tell me your story. He said, well, I got a group of 18 men, and we are in a room that holds 20 chairs. And so clearly, we cannot double because there is no room for any more than 2 more people. Anybody want to guess? You want to guess what I said to him? I said, have you ever thought about living out 2 Timothy 2:2? Have you ever have you ever thought about saying to somebody in your group the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, and trust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others? Have you thought about sitting an apprentice with a group down the hall and start a new group and dividing your group? And he saw pretty quickly where I was going, and he stopped me, and he said, no. We've talked about that. My small group pastor has talked to me about that. My pastor has talked to me about that. I've heard that spiel from the pulpit many times, and I've talked to my group about that. And here's the deal, Josh. We're not, I want you to pay attention to this next word. He said, we're not willing to do that. And that word just kind of hung in the air for me. And I thought about it many times since then. We're not willing to do that. And this is the conclusion I've come to. I've come to the conclusion that those are words that no Christian ought to say to their Lord about anything. Now, I've actually advised against many groups doubling at this time. I don't think dividing, is the universal answer for every group at every time. And I'm not saying that. But I am saying that the issue of willingness, what he said to me is, let me paraphrase, we are stubbornly refusing to do that. And those are words I believe no Christian ought to ever say to their Lord about anything. Somewhere along the line, as we come and grow in Christian maturity, we come to realize he's God and I'm not. He's boss and I'm not. He's Lord and I am slave. And no Christian ought to ever say we are willing. And I am convinced, having taught this to hundreds and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, I am convinced that one of the main reasons we don't do this, that we're not seeing a doubling group movement, is simply that many are simply not willing to say goodbye. They like a big group. They like their fellowship. They like us 4 no more, same as before. They like their crowd. They like their audience. And they are not willing to live out 2 Timothy 2:2. Now, let me make it a little bit easier on you, all right? This is what I call doubling's dirty little secret, the dirty little secret of dividing groups. Because, see, people will say they're not willing, and they'll say their group is a warm, loving fellowship, and they just love each other so much. But the dirty little secret is this. If you peel back the layers just a bit, this is what you're going to find. People are not actually opposed. If you will brainstorm, if you're a small group pastor and you want to get your groups divided, and you get to brainstorming with them, they're not actually opposed to saying goodbye to the group. What they're opposed to is saying goodbye to their best friends. And if you can work out a way for them to take their best friends with them, it doesn't hurt so badly to say goodbye to everybody else. Now, we don't want to say that right out loud, but when we divide groups, what we're looking for is we're going to try to look for the place where they're already divided. In other words, there's a new church that started here in town. It's a cowboy church, and apparently doing really, really well. And so, it's the cowboy music and country music, and they all wear cowboy hats and cowboy boots and so on. If there was a cowboy class in my church, I were not a pastor, but I was a part of a larger church, and there was a cowboy, I'd want to start a group of all the non-cowboys, because I'm not a cowboy I don't like country music. All right, I don't own a cowboy hat. I don't own any cowboy boots. And the point is, we all have this kind of affinity. And my observation about small groups is this: that they works best when the more we have in common, they work. The better they work. Truth be told, I'd like to be a part of a group that wants to be fit. I'd like to be a part of a group that never brings donuts. that tries to take care of their body. And that just may seem not non-Christian to you, but I'm telling you, that's the way I feel. I'd go hiking almost every afternoon, and I'd like to be a part of a group that loves Jesus and loves hiking. I used to play tennis, and I thought to myself, we ought to start a group among tennis players, and all those tennis players can get together. And generally speaking, the more that group has in common, in old-fashioned Sunday school world, we did that by age. And that works well up until you get about decades, by the way. In other words, if you get older people and younger people and you divide off the older, let's say it's a young married adult group. About half of them are parents, half of them are not. Get the parents together in one group. That tends to work pretty well. But then if the church grows real large and you're subdividing by, 32 to 34-year-olds here and 36 to 38, you probably get some other criteria where we try to find something that these people all have in common. Because if I can keep my best friends with me and go to that new group, there are some people that it doesn't hurt all those. I don't want to hurt your feelings here, but those cowboys, it doesn't hurt all that much to say goodbye to them. And here's why it's important. Love at its best is a little bit selfish. That is, people want to be loved in a selfish way. What I mean is, they want to imagine that you want them to be there. And let me give you this reading to illustrate this point. I rise early on this Friday, as I do every day, to prepare coffee and mix a protein shake. The television news plays quietly in the corner. Flossie, my wife, still asleep. Sometime after 8, she begins floating out of slumber. I begin to bring the shake to her bedside, put the straw in her mouth, and give her cheek a little pat as she begins to drink. Slowly the liquid recedes. I sit there holding the glass, thinking about the past 8 years. At first, she asked only an occasional incoherent or irrelevant question. Otherwise, she was normal. I tried for 2 years to find out what in the world was wrong. She grew agitated, restless, defensive, and she was constantly tired and unable to hold a conversation. At last, a neurologist diagnosed Alzheimer's disease. He said he wasn't sure. A firm diagnosis could only come from examining brain tissue after death. There is no known cause for this malady and no known cure. I enrolled Flossie in a daycare center for adults, but she kept wandering off the property. We medicated her to keep her calm. Perhaps from receiving too much of one drug, she suffered a violent seizure that left her immeasurably worse. Lethargic, incontinent, unable to speak clearly or take care of herself. My anguish gradually became resignation. I gave up all plans of retirement travel, recreation, visits to see grandchildren, the golden era that some people dream about. I gave up on that. The years have passed and my days have become routine, demanding, lonely, seemingly without accomplishment to measure. Flossie has gradually dropped in strength and weight from 125 pounds down to 86. I take some time to work with a support group and to attend church, but the daily needs keep me fixing, feeding, bathing, diapering, changing beds, cleaning house, fixing meals, dressing and undressing her, and doing whatever else a nurse and homemaker does morning to night. Occasionally a word bubbles up from the muddled processes of Flossie's diseased brain, sometimes relevant, sometimes the name of a family member or the name of an object, but just a single word. What would she communicate from that muddled brain? On this Friday morning, after she finishes her shake, I give her some apple juice, then massage her arms and caress her forehead and cheeks. Most of the time her eyes are closed, but today she looks up at me, and suddenly her mouth forms 4 words in a row. Anybody want to guess what she'd say? Do you want me? Do you want? Do you want? Not do you love me? Do you want me? Perfect enunciation, softly spoken. I want to shout for joy. Of course I want you, Flossie, I say, hugging her and kissing her. And so after months of total silence, she put together the most sincere question any human can ever ask. She speaks in a way for people everywhere. Those shackled by sin, addiction, hunger, thirst, mental illness, physical pain, frightened, people afraid of the answer but desperate enough to frame the question. And I think there are people all around you, all around your church, who are asking this question. Not does God exist, not about your theology. What they're asking is, do you want me? You may have seen these commercials for the He Gets Us campaign. There's our advertising part of that campaign, and then there's this whole back end where people can go to the website and they can register, and then there's groups of churches. And we just signed up for this, and last Saturday, I had someone message me through this app, and she said, grief, losing my husband and my best friend, anger, hating everyone and everything. And I think beneath that pain, what she's really asking is there anybody there at your church that wants me? And here's the deal. If you got a little bitty group, your group will naturally reach out to others. But the bigger that group becomes, the more likely it is to naturally and normally reach out to others. And the question that a watching world is asking is, do you want me? And if you embrace the vision of growing and dividing, your group will stay small, and there is an inverse relationship between the size of the group and the amount of life change, and you will give yourself to reaching out to others because you want them, And may God richly bless all of us as we pray and work toward a doubling group movement for the glory of God.